Hi there, welcome to the practical side of this course with Report 1. Now, we've gone through the solely theoretical parts of this course and we're now on to the fun bits. Not that of course the last two videos weren't fun. After the pre-course learning and the tour of Power BI, we should be just a little bit more familiar with the 4 parts of Power BI that we need to go through to create a report. Don't worry if they're not really ingrained yet, that's what the rest of the course is for. And of course you've got your slide decks in the last couple of videos, which I really encourage you to refer to if you need to. So let's get underway and look what this first report we're going to create will be all about. So the point of this course is to gradually increase the complexity of each report, to go from something quite straightforward, something quick and easy in this report, to something really quite complex by the end of the course. At the beginning of each report, we're going to lay out the objectives of what we're going to do, both in terms of gathering some necessary information to write the report and what parts of Power BI we're going to learn about. So firstly, what is this report going to do? Let's say we're part of an accounts payable team in a finance department. That's the team that looks through invoices every day and checks them to what we've ordered to make sure that we're not overpaying for something or being charged for something we haven't ordered. We want to build a report just to keep track of these invoices and look at the amount of money being spent in different locations, different departments of the business, and with different suppliers. So that's what the purpose of this report is. Let's also collect some useful information which will help us think about how to structure this report. So this report is for personal use only. This means that when we come to putting the report online, we can put it in a place that only we can access. The report will be driven by a single dataset which will be held in a CSV file. A CSV file is a single worksheet file that can be viewed in Excel. It stands for comma separated value, which means that instead of having data split into columns, all the data is in a single column, but there are commas separating the values rather than columns. It's a very compressed file, but it isn't actually an Excel file. The name of the worksheet in the Excel file will be the same as the file name up to a character limit. Okay, next, the data file type. The data file type in this case will be a replacement type. What do I mean by that? So let's say we're looking at invoice information from the beginning of the year, so from the 1st of January, and we're currently at the end of April. Our first report would then show all data from the beginning of January until the end of April. We'll save that file down in a shared drive or OneDrive or something, and then connect Power BI to it. By the end of the month though, we want to see all the information in Power BI again, and so we'd need to rerun the CSV file so that it includes the extra month of data. Replacement data file type means that if we were to run the same report at the end of May, the report would show all information from the beginning of January to the end of May, and to refresh Power BI, we'd then save this new file over the top of the file that only showed January to April. We'd then refresh Power BI to bring in the new dataset. The alternative data file type is incremental. This means that in the same example, when we run the same report at the end of May, the data file would only show data from the end of April to the end of May, and we would save this file alongside the previous file showing data from January to April. Now, in terms of when we're going to refresh the PBIX file or the Power BI file, we're only going to do it manually whenever we get new data sets in. Okay, there's a bit of background then on what we're going to be getting up to in this report. So let's then turn to the parts of Power BI we're going to be learning to use in this report. Let's have a look. So we'll also see this slide in each report, and it breaks down the main topics that we're going to cover off in each lesson. So firstly, we start off in Power Query. What's the point of Power Query? To connect data and then transform it from dirty data to clean data. We'd better start off learning how to connect to datasets then, and we start off here using the simplest type of connector, which is a CSV connector. We'll then get more used to trundling around the Power Query editor and performing some simple transformation exercises, including promoting headers and removing rows. After that, we'll load our data to the data model and introduce the idea of filter context, which is absolutely key throughout Power BI, and then move on to some implicit measure calculations, which are the easiest kind of calculations that you can ask Power BI to perform. To be honest, you don't do anything, really. Power BI does it all for you. We then move on to the report view, and we'll have a look at a couple of simple visuals in a card visual and a table visual. We'll use the canvas, the data pane, and the visualizations pane here, of course, and then finally, we'll shove the whole caboodle up onto the Power BI service. Right, jolly good. Let's get underway with this first report. The very first thing we need to do as a report writer is look at the data we're going to be working with. Okay, this is the invoice dataset file. This is the file that we're going to use to create our Power BI reports. And it's going to look ever so slightly different from yours if you've decided to open yours, because I've already split out my columns according to their delimiters. Don't worry about having to do that. Power BI will do it for you. Okay, the first thing to consider here is that there are a lot of rows in this dataset. There's about 12,000 of them. Not so many that we're pushing the limits of an Excel workbook, but certainly enough to cause Excel some problems if we start putting in a ton of calculated columns. Don't worry about the amount of rows of data though. Power BI is built to deal with literally millions of rows. So the 12,000 or so we've got here will be absolutely fine. Now let's have a look at the actual data itself. What is this file showing us? So this workbook is a report straight from our accounting system, showing a listing of invoices for January to April. Our first column is a list of invoice names that our accounting system has given to our received invoices. And that's why if you whiz down the list, then you'll see that they all start with the prefix INV. The second column or field of data is a date column. Now you may raise a quizzical eyebrow at this, but there's plenty to talk about in this particular column. So firstly, formatting the date column. Here we've got an 8-digit value representing year and then month and then day. Now you may know that in Excel, every day since 1st of January 1900 is represented by a number, with the 1st of January 1900 being number 1, the 2nd of Jan being number 2, the 3rd being 3, and so on, with every day increasing the number by 1. The date of this recording is the 5th of April 2024, and that is 45,387, there being 45,386 days since the 1st of January 1900. Now there's 5 digits in 45,387, so these 8-digit numbers are well in advance of the current date, and Excel doesn't know what to do with them, so it doesn't do anything, and certainly doesn't manage to put the values into the actual date format. Now to do that, you'd need to know some decent Excel functions, including left, mid, right, and several date functions. Power BI will extract this information into the right format though, no problem, and with no real help from you. From a data perspective, we want to know exactly what this date represents. Is it the invoice date? Is it the invoice received date? The date that the invoice went into our accounting system? And so on. And as you might appreciate, each different date has a slightly different implication for the report that we build. Now the next two columns after that are the supplier reference and supplier name. The supplier reference is a unique numerical code that our accounting system has given to a new supplier every time they've entered into our accounting system for the first time. The supplier name, on the other hand, is clearly the name of our suppliers who are selling us kit or services. Now, both of these columns are really useful in different places of Power BI. The supplier name is obviously really useful in the report view stage, where we're creating graphs and visualizations, of course. Imagine for a moment a pie chart showing spend for the top 10 suppliers. How would it look to the many people that will review your report if instead of supplier names, labeling different segments of the pie chart, there are numerical values instead? How would reviewers know to which suppliers those numbers relate? On the other hand though, the supplier reference is much more helpful in the Power Query and data model stage, as at these stages we're much more interested in joining datasets together. To join two datasets, we need an identical field of data in both datasets. That is much more likely to happen with numerical references, as we don't need to worry about case or punctuation. Even in the same accounting system, you'd be surprised how often text values that should be the same can be ever so slightly different in different places. We then have location ID, note no location name, which is a reference to the geographical location of an entity in our business. When we create our report, you'll probably notice just how irritating it is that we don't have a name to go with that location ID. Just one of the reasons why this is a basic report. So next, we have our cost center number and cost center name, which are the name and accounting system designated unique reference of all the departments in our business. Last but not least, we have the total cost of each invoice. Now you can see that the data in this table is in a nice columnar format. We have discrete columns of data, meaning values of each column are laid out in columns, not in rows. It's also fairly clean. We haven't really got blank rows or columns. Every column has a title and you can trust me when I say that there aren't any errors like #refs or #nas. There are a couple of things that we would want to get rid of though, and that is the report run date at the top of the screen in user ID, as well as at the bottom of the report, you have a total row. A total row is something that many system reports generate, and they will make a mess of our graphs in our report view. Power BI will automatically summarize the values in these rows, as well as the actual data in the report. We will see that in our report. Speaking of which, it's time to get started. Okay, the first thing to do is close any and all workbooks that we're going to connect to. Power BI really doesn't like connecting to or refreshing datasets that are open in Excel. Next, we click on the Power BI desktop option, wherever you've saved it, and follow along. Right, once we're onto Power BI, we get this startup screen. And that's for initial shortcuts, showing us sections of Power BI that Microsoft thinks we're likely to need startup. However, I think it'll be more useful to work from screens that we're going to see all the time in Power BI, so we'll close this screen. Okay, so hopefully we're now at a screen that you recognize. What's this screen called? Okay, just in case you weren't sure, this screen is called the report view. Do you remember what we can do on this screen? Okay, on this screen, we can create our visualization. But the first thing we need to do, cast your minds back to the pre-learning or consult your report flow chart from earlier. What's the first thing that we need to do? Of course, we're going to need to get some data to create our reports. And to get our data, what stage of Power BI do we need to be in? Okay, Power Query is where we need to be, and that's enough with the questions. To get into Power Query, we need to go to the ribbon in the report view, and then to this button here, which tees Power BI up to connect to some data. If we select the drop-down, then we'll see lots of options for connections come up. There are options all over the place for connecting to data in different places, including analysis services, including the internet, the Dataverse, and if you click on more, then there'll be other ones for Oracle, Salesforce, various data warehouses, as well as the ones that we're going to look at, mainly being the CSV, Excel, and folder options. Now, for our first connection attempt, considering that the data we want is in a CSV file, which option should we choose? I'll give you this one for free. It's the Text CSV Connector option. The Excel option will work too, but Text CSV is just a little bit more intuitive as we go through the rest of the connection phases. Right, next we get a File Explorer menu coming up that asks us where the file that we want to connect to is stored. We just need to select the right file. For us, this is the invoice dataset, which should be stored on OneDrive or your hard drive in the Report One folder from your course resources zip file. Now, because this is a CSV file, which means that there's only a single worksheet and no fancy tables, charts, graphs, or anything else vaguely stimulating, then Power BI doesn't need any more information to connect to the data. Power BI brings up a simple menu saying, here's a preview of the data. Do you want to load this into the data model? Or alternatively, is there some fancy transformation stuff that you want to do to change how this file looks? Now, if you're happy with how the data looks, then you can just opt to click on the load button. However, if you want to change how the data looks before you load it into the data model, then you need to click on Transform Data. That's what we're going to do, and this will take us into the Power Query editor. Now, before we start doing any of our transformations, let's just remind ourselves of what the different parts of the Power Query editor are. Right in the middle of the screen, we have the Power Query preview screen, which shows us how the data looks in the file that we've just connected. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have the Queries pane, which shows the various connections that we have in this PBIX or Power BI file. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have the Query Settings pane. This shows the different commands that we've used to transform the file that we've connected to from how it looks in the original file to how we would like it to look before we load the data into the data model. At the top of the screen, we have the ribbon, and this holds nice, easy buttons to use to perform our transformation or commands. Between the ribbon and the Power Query editor's preview screen, we have the formula bar, and this holds the code that Power Query uses to perform the transformations. Now, just in case you don't have a couple of these items, let's just run through how to make sure they come up on your screen. So first off, the preview screen will always be on the screen when you open the editor. However, the Queries pane on the left-hand side may be hidden, and in order to unhide it, you can click on the arrow next to the word Queries to hide or reveal this pane. The same goes for the Power Query ribbon. You may have a smaller version of what we see on the screen here, and you can reveal or hide the Power Query editor's ribbon using the arrow in the top right-hand corner. Next, if your Query Settings pane is not currently visible, then you can reveal it by clicking on the View tab at the top of the screen, and then clicking on the Query Settings button in the Layout section of the ribbon on the left-hand side. You can also view or unview the formula bar. Now, before we start our transformations, there are two things that we need to go through and that I'm often asked. Number one, any changes that we make in Power BI into this dataset to transform it only affects the information in Power BI. No changes are made to the connected file. Secondly, the Power Query editor does not operate like Excel. We talked about this in the pre-course learning, but just to underline it, you are not able to click on individual cells and edit them in the way that you can in Excel. You are only able to perform actions on columns and rows using the buttons on the ribbon or right-clicking column headers to bring up a list of commands. You may later on write code directly into the formula bar rather than clicking on command buttons, but that's quite advanced and there's plenty that you can do simply by using the buttons on the ribbon. Right, how should we transform this file? As we said when we were looking at the base data CSV file, there isn't much transformation to do to get the data in the best possible format for the data model. We want to 1. Remove the top 3 rows. 2. Remove the total line at the bottom of the file. And 3. Move the title row, which is currently in row 4, into the headers row. In the Query Settings pane on the right-hand side of the screen, we can see that there are already 2 applied steps, the source step and a change type step. The source step is the command that Power BI uses to connect to the dataset. If I click on it, then you can see the code that comes up in the formula bar. Don't worry if it looks incomprehensible, as at this point you don't need to understand M code, and that would come more under the heading of advanced. However, you will probably recognize that there is a file address showing where the data that we are connecting to is stored. Underneath the source step, there is also a change type step. We look at data types much more in the next report, but suffice it to say that Power BI attempts to assign a data type to each column of data such as a text type, a number type, a date type, a time type, and so on. So, question 1, how do we get rid of the top 3 rows? We of course need to perform a transformation. The transformation in this case is called Remove Rows, and the command button for this is in the Home tab. I'll go to the Home tab and find the section called Reduce Rows on the ribbon, which is in the middle of the ribbon. I'll then click on the drop-down arrow of Remove Rows. Now, a number of useful options come up, including remove top rows, remove bottom rows, remove alternating rows, duplicates, blank rows, and errors. Now we'll use several of these throughout our course, but for the moment, we just need to click on Remove Top Rows. A new menu comes up, asking us how many rows we want to remove from the top of the screen. Now I'm going to put the number 2. Now you're probably pondering, why does he only remove the top 2 rows, as there's a blank row before you get to the headers? And that's a pretty fair question. Now the reason why I've done this is because I want to show you how to edit a step which you've already put into the Power Query Settings pane. To edit a step you've already performed, go to the cog icon on the right-hand side of the step in the Apply Steps pane and click on it. The original Remove Top Row menu then appears, and we can replace the 2 with a 3 and click OK. Now we can see that the top 3 rows have disappeared. Okay, what other cleaning magic do we need to do? You may remember that at the bottom of our connected dataset, we also had a totals row. Now when we start creating our visualizations, that totals row is going to cause us a problem. Let me talk you through why. So as we said at the beginning of the course, Power BI works by aggregating, which frequently, but not always, means adding together the numerical values of a column so that we can better understand a dataset. Now, if you have a total number at the bottom of a numerical value column, then that total number will also be included in the summing process and will produce a total double what the number should be. We therefore need to encourage its exit from the premises, and to do that, we can use pretty much the same command sequence as we did to get rid of the top 3 rows. Again, in the Home tab, we can go to the Remove Row section of the ribbon, and then click on the drop-down option. And now this time, instead of selecting Remove Top Rows, we'll select Remove Bottom Rows. Again, a new menu comes up asking us how many rows we want to remove. Now I know that there will only be 1 row, and therefore I can put the number 1 and click OK. Now the next thing we want to do is promote our header row, which is currently in row 1, and put it into the headers row. Now this is really important, as when we get to the report view and the data model, we're going to need to reference particular columns, or at least know what's in them. And that's pretty hard if our columns are just called column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on. So we want to replace the headers or titles of columns 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on with the headers that were in our original dataset. To do that, we can click on Use First Row as Headers, which is in the Transform section of the Home tab. Again, I've clicked on the drop-down arrow, and to see what my options are, we can see 2 options. We can use first row as headers, or alternatively, use headers as first row. Now, I want to put the information in row 1 into the headers, so I'll select the command Use First Row as Headers. There we go. We can now see that the information in the first row has moved into the headers. Right, let's have a look at the Query Settings pane, where we can see that a number of new steps have appeared. When we started this file, we only had a source step, which connected Power BI to our dataset, as well as a change type step. We've now got 4 new steps. Okay, before we move the data into the data model, let's look at how the different steps we performed to transform the information in the file we connected to, from how it looks in the connected file compared to how it looks when we load the information into the data model. So I'll click on the source step, and we can see that the top rows have disappeared and the headers are still in row 4. This is how the information appears in our base dataset. Clicking on Change Type doesn't make a whole lot of difference, unless you know where to look, and we'll come on to that in the next lesson. Clicking on Remove Top Rows removes the first 3 rows, and then clicking on Remove Bottom Rows removes the bottom rows, which we can't see. Finally, clicking on Promoted Headers moves our headers row into the column headers. Now I'm happy with this transformation for the moment, so we can click on the button in the top left-hand corner of the Home tab, Close and Apply, to bring this information into the data model. Power BI then loads the information into the data model. This is quite a simple transformation, so the load process should be quite quick, but just so you're aware, in more complex files, this process can take a little bit longer.